Hello everyone. Tonight, I'll be narrating 3 new creepy posts that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. If you wish to post any good stories on my own subreddit, it would be much appreciated. After you have listened to these stories, let me know in the comments what you thought of them. But without further ado, let's dive straight into these experiences.
These are their stories.
This happened in 2004 when I was just 11. My mom was a paralegal and at the time worked at a family law firm. Something urgent came up and she had to go get case materials from her job that night, so she took me with her to go grab them. It was around 7 p.m. I should mention I guess that I lived in a fairly affluent nice neighborhood where it was very safe and nothing bad really happened. I say this to give credit to my mom's insane sense of intuition that likely saved our life that night. We pull into the parking lot and my mom doesn't get out of the car. I'm an only child, so I was reading in the backseat and honestly didn't notice nor care, but eventually I asked her why we were getting out the car. She replied that she was waiting because as we pulled in, someone walked through the parking lot and got into their car right behind us, then proceeded to wait in his car while it was on with the lights pointed at our car. It wasn't overtly sketchy or creepy, as there were several non-ominous explanations, but my mom had a gut feeling and I'm glad she trusted her intuition and proceeded very deliberately and carefully because it quite possibly saved her life. After 5 to 10 minutes, but eventually, she turned to me and was like, okay, I have no idea what this guy is doing, so let's just go grab the stuff and leave. I didn't know this at the time because at this point I was mildly oblivious, but he got out of the car and followed us. My mom told me to hurry up because it was freezing and we jogged to the door. Our building required a car to buzz you inside, so once we got in we figured we'd be fine. The parking lot we were in is giant and random people hang out there all the time, and he came from seemingly nowhere, so the chances of him also having a car to buzz in were not very high. This was also something I wasn't really aware of or paying attention to at the time, but a few moments after we buzzed in, thinking we were in the clear, he came in right behind us. I asked my mom about this. I didn't learn what happened until years later. I can understand why she didn't tell me, and she said a few things ran through her mind. He could have been a total psycho who stole someone's card, which was the least likely as it was just too random, so he was either an employee or a client. They held late night meditation sessions inside the building, so it was typical to give clients a temporary pass for convenience. I'm going to assume this practice changed after this event. My mom, knowing the ID card system, actually wondered if she was overthinking it at that point, but she had that gut feeling and stuck to it, and truly taught me from the get-go to screw politeness. I hadn't seen him follow us in, and my mom honestly played it so cool that I didn't even put 2 and 2 together and just thought it was another random employee. But I remember just having a weird gut feeling that I just couldn't put my finger on, and mercifully I just shut up and followed my mom's lead. Before he came in, my mom was frantically pressing the elevator button just in case he somehow got in, but it hadn't come yet. So he came in and waited for the elevator for us. My mom was faking being polite and said hi. Then when it came, he got in and held the door open for us, waiting. My mom really killed it thinking on her feet and pretended to get a call and kind of shooed me to the side and told him, oh, I have to take this, so we'll just wait for the next one. Thank you, and ushered us away. I followed without protest even though I saw that no one had called her. After getting the weird feeling and seeing her fake a call, I knew something was up. That, and he was extremely creepy standing there holding open the elevator. The second it took off, she immediately pressed the button so the next one would come down and grabbed me and said quietly, that was the man who was waiting behind us in the car in the parking lot. He got out of his car and followed us inside. I was not letting us get in an elevator with him. When the elevator comes, we're gonna run to my office and wait a few minutes, then take the stairwell out. At this point, I'm freaking out but stayed calm and quiet and followed her lead. She saw that his elevator went to the 3rd floor. She was on the 2nd floor so we wouldn't run into him. Even if he somehow discovered we went to the 2nd floor in a different elevator, her office was right next to it and he wouldn't have ever caught up to us. We ran into her office and locked the door and waited about 5 to 10 minutes while she held her ear to the door to make sure she didn't hear anything. We then unlocked the door and quickly looked out, then ran to the stairwell and ran the heck out of her office, got in the car and drove home. That was the end of the story for me at that time. I asked my mom when I was a teenager if she remembered that weird time at her office when we hid in her office and ran away from a guy in the elevator and her face turned white, and she told me what transpired while we were waiting in her office and ran out the soundproof stairwell. The man in the elevator was there for a custody meditation session with his estranged ex-wife. He was against the divorce and was desperately trying to stop his wife from divorcing him. The custody session took place before my mom and I got there. He had refused to sign papers that would have awarded him less than 50% of their children living with them. He apparently got so angry that he got up and walked out halfway through the session. His wife decided to remain in the office for about 25 minutes after he left because she was freaked out. During this time, he went back to his car and sat inside and sobbed. This is when my mom and I had pulled into the office building. He eventually grabbed a pair of kitchen scissors he had in the glove box and got out and went back into the building, which is when he followed my mom and I inside. I'm not sure if us getting out of the car kind of snapped him out of it and gave him the push, if you will, to go back inside. He came back inside at the same time as us and got in the elevator, which he invited us inside with him. Based on the evidence from the trial involving a gray sweatshirt, prosecutors put together that he went to the 3rd floor and looked around, waiting for his wife. He got back in the elevator and waited until his wife went to leave and get in the elevator. He proceeded to ambush her and stabbed her 106 times with a pair of scissors in his pocket. He murdered his wife in the most gruesome fashion. The details of the case are horrifying. The links are below, but fair warning on the graphic details. What chills me to my core is wondering what would have happened if we stayed in the elevator. It was clear he had an agenda and a direct target. It's highly possible he would have left us alone and went along with his plan. But the last detail is that while he was waiting in his car, he was snorting meth and was high as a kite. The mediator was the key witness in trial, and her testimony is horrifying. Her husband also worked in the building, and she was walking to his office when she heard screaming. When she got closer to the elevator, she heard the wife yelling her name. She yelled out, "It's him." She found the husband dragging his wife inside the elevator with blood everywhere, all over the walls. Then, in front of the mediator, he continued to plunge the scissors into his wife. When the police got there, they found him holding his wife, who was dead, choking her with his arm around her neck. This all took place while we were still in the building. We didn't hear it because we were in the cement stairwell and ran directly outside. All of the above is to say that he clearly went absolutely psychotic and lost his absolute mind. Someone who stabs their wife over 100 times with a pair of poultry scissors is clearly insane, but him rapidly continuing to murder her in front of the mediator and choking a dead body when the police arrived is a horrifying level of insane. That, and he was high on meth. There's nothing to say that we wouldn't have set him off in the most random way, or that he had already entered his psychotic break, or that he wouldn't have wanted us to get out of the way. My mom's actions likely saved our lives that night. She had a gut feeling and trusted her intuition. My mom knew the fake call might have seemed like a lie, but she did not care and was absolutely not getting in the elevator with him. She's not only my hero, but my best teacher. I learned that night to be hypervigilant, pay attention to every little detail in my surroundings, and to never dismiss my gut. I will never forget the slightly too wide, toothy smile that didn't even seem to reach his eyes, while he stood 5 feet away from my mom and I holding open the elevator. I think about it all the time, of what could have happened if we got in the elevator. My husband and I were at the supermarket and our baby was being especially fussy, so he took her for a quick drive, the motion of which usually calms her down. It only took about 10 minutes to settle her and I was still in the store, but unsure how much longer I'd be, and there's poor cell reception inside, so he pulled back into the parking lot to wait for me. It was an unseasonably nice day, so he took her in her car seat to sit on one of the benches outside the store. He took a business call and had just sat them down, absent-mindedly rocking the carrier, when a woman, well-dressed, mid-30s, average height, fit build, approached them. It's not uncommon for people to ask to play with our baby. She's got big rosy cheeks, soft wisp of gold hair, and the most adorable gurgly toothless grin, especially when she's deep into a good nap. But her nap schedule is paramount, so my husband was preparing to tell the woman she actually couldn't play with our baby right then. She walked over right in their direction, brimming with nonchalant confidence, and before he could even finish his sentence explaining she was napping and not to be touched, she picked up the carrier and started walking off. He was in shock for a minute, not fully believing someone would be ballsy enough to do something so sinister in plain daylight, so he said, "Excuse me, put her down." As his panic mounted, she remained calm this entire time, but when he called after her, she started walking away more briskly than when she approached. He ran full speed ahead, tried to grapple the carrier out of her hands, finally resulting to restraining her arms. This woman yells, "Help! He's trying to take my baby! Kidnapping! 911! Help!" kicking him in the shin and pulling a pink bottle of pepper spray out of her handbag. Of course, no one in the parking lot was clocking the earlier interaction and assumed he was really a kidnapper. A lone man in a Deadpool t-shirt versus a tiny well-dressed woman. Immediately, a man knocked my husband to the ground and was holding him down. He could hear bystanders encouraging the woman to file a police report, but she was doing a very convincing job of acting shaken up and insisted she just wanted to get home. To make matters worse for my husband, she was driving a minivan. He was in a raw state of panic, realizing the entire parking lot had banded together to inadvertently facilitate the kidnapping of our daughter. He was begging and pleading with them, but no one was listening. They just kept screaming at him that the jig was up and he needed to lie still and wait for police and stop terrorizing a young mother. My husband finally had the novel idea to show them family pictures on his phone, but too panicked to think clearly, this manifested as him shouting, "I have pictures of the baby in my phone," which, of course, everyone interpreted him as having stalker photos of the baby. It was at this point that a man, I can't entirely blame the man considering what he thought was going on, kicked my husband as hard as he could in the ribs. It was at this point I was coming out of the store and I thought he was being robbed by these people. I was yelling for security, so panicked my chest constricted and I could barely get any sound out. It was only then I realized he did not have our baby with him. When I saw she was being held by a woman, I was relieved. I thought maybe the woman had intervened to move my daughter out of harm's way, while my husband was being robbed and was walking away to get help. I couldn't find a security guard outside the store, so I ran up to the people holding my husband down, waving my wallet pleading, "Take everything you want, just let up and leave us alone." And one of the men holding him down said something like, "Lady, we need to wait for the police to deal with him." And I was so confused. Why would the muggers have called the police? I just kept stammering, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" I made out someone saying, "He tried to abduct that woman's kid." I did not understand and was sure I'd misheard him. My husband would never hurt a child, and we have 4 kids. If he were going to commit a crime, bringing home another kid would be the bottom of his list. I kept trying to understand what the man was saying, and suddenly, it all clicked. I looked around for the woman who had the baby carrier, and she was halfway across the parking lot. I went into total ballistic tiger cub mode, literally leaping out of my heels, and sprinted across the parking lot. I grabbed the woman by her hair and squeezed her throat with my other hand, which didn't do much. She was getting away even as I grappled with her. Amazingly, none of the other bystanders had yet to connect that my husband was telling the truth, and this woman was absconding with my baby. I yanked on her hair as hard as I could, and that was enough to make her drop the carrier. I was so scared and surprised that I actually just threw myself on top of the carrier, covering the entire thing like a blanket, and stayed that way without saying or doing anything else. The woman left. Not one person tried to stop her, even though she was clearly leaving without the child she claimed was hers, which would be pretty damn incriminating if I'd watched this scene unfold. Within the next couple of minutes, police had arrived. After all that, there were still several bystanders who explained it as my husband trying to kidnap the baby. The police, to my horror, assumed that she must have not had bad intentions. The first questions they asked me after getting her description weren't investigative. They were questions thinly veiled trying to convince me not to pursue charges, still placing blame on my husband. A small sampling. Do your husband and the baby look dissimilar? Is there a chance she thought he was abducting the baby and she was trying to intervene? Did she seem groggy or confused? Could she have mistaken either of them for her own family members? They spent more time verifying that the baby was actually mine than they concerned themselves with the fact that the baby was not actually hers. My husband had called his brother at that point, who works in an office with a lot of lawyers, and connected with one ASAP, who gave us the priceless advice to get every officer's name and badge number, to request copies of the store's security tapes right away, and to escalate our complaint higher up the chain if these officers weren't taking us seriously. Finally, we had reason enough to believe we were being taken seriously, and we went home, and both just shook and cried until we had to get our other kids from school. My husband is seething with rage and grappling with a feeling of helplessness from how little he was able to do, and has 2 cracked ribs from when the man kicked him. To the officer's credit, they did ask if he'd like to press charges, but considering the man was genuinely convinced at the time that he was on the right side of intervening in a kidnapping and stayed to talk to a police and apologize profusely when the truth became clear, he declined to press charges. Amazingly and frustratingly, there were still people who stuck around to talk to police who were giving my husband dirty looks, and one man who even implored the police to involve CPS to verify it was really our baby. Parking lot kidnapper, let's not meet. 3 years ago, I was living with my then boyfriend in a 1-bedroom apartment in a little mountain town. It was a half-basement unit, so the bottom of all our windows were level with the ground outside. It was also an older apartment and not all the windows could fully lock. One day, my boyfriend comes home from work while I'm laying on the sofa and immediately runs up to the window near me and looks out of it frantically. He then goes to look out every other window in the house, then walks around the outside looking in the windows. When he comes back from this confusing exploit, I ask him what is going on and why he's being a spaz. "I think I just walked up on a dude looking in the window at you. He took off as I walked up," he tells me. This was naturally very unsettling, but after discussing it and considering the time of day, it was about 2 p.m. and the number of people out and about around the complex at the time, we came to the conclusion that it was just a curious neighbor or someone passing by happening to glance in. With that, we forgot about it. If only that was the end. For the next couple of months, odd stuff happened here and there. Someone would knock on the door occasionally, then when I went to answer, no one was there. I'd find things in my apartment that I wasn't familiar with, or things like clothing items would vanish. I didn't really think twice about any of it until one night. My boyfriend and I were arguing, around 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were being a little loud. We were standing in the kitchen face to face, His back was to an open window with the blinds up halfway and I was facing it. Amidst our arguing, I glanced behind him at the window thinking I saw the reflection of a face in it. The window was open. It wasn't my face. There was a man with his face pressed almost against the window screen, watching us. Given the fact that we were arguing and it was late, I thought it might have been a concerned neighbor walking up to the window to speak to us. A main walkway for the complex was right on the other side of the window, so I spoke to him. "Hello? Can I help you?" I asked a little aggressively, thinking a neighbor was intruding on our privacy. He responded to this by staring, unwavering and cold, right at me. His face did not change expression. He did not blink or move, just looked right at me a way I have never been looked at before or since. In this instance, I also realized that because of the window being level with the ground, the only way this man's face could be where it was if he was laying on the ground outside the apartment or crouched and contorted to look into the window. My heart sank. I buried my face in my boyfriend's chest and closed my eyes in fear. My boyfriend, up to this point, thought I was messing with him. When I buried my face in his chest, only then did he say, "Is there really someone at the window?" I whispered yes to him. He felt my fear and took a moment before he turned around. By the time he did, the man was gone. It was at this point I started to think about all the little odd occurrences that I'd been experiencing. I assumed the worst. I filed a police report with this description, and my brother loaded my apartment up with weapons to protect me, or at least inform this peeping Tom that I was armed. After that night myself, my boyfriend, and my brother were on high alert. There were a couple times when my brother came over that he saw a sketchy dude hanging around, and even one time he saw him at my window. He tried to follow him discreetly, but the guy took off running as soon as my brother stepped in his direction. The last night I had an experience with this man. I was sitting home alone on my sofa. My boyfriend was at work at a restaurant about 2 blocks away. He had picked me up from work an hour earlier. We had sat on the sofa together a little while we got home. Then he kissed me and left for work, locking the door behind him. After he left, I continued to sit on the couch and watch TV. After about an hour of me sitting there in silence, I hear a door creak open. It's a small apartment, so to see the bedroom and bathroom doors from the couch, all I had to do was lean a little to the left. I assumed it was one of my cats coming out of the bedroom, so you can imagine my shock when I lean over and see the door that's opening is the door to the water heater closet / small storage space. I look to my right and see both my cats sleeping soundly at the other end of the couch. I look back to the door and it's still creaking open very slowly. It opens enough for me to see it. A set of fingers wrapped around the door, easing the door ever so gently to open as quietly as possible. That was going to be a no for me. I ran barefooted out the door, into the snow, and down the street to my boyfriend's work. I called the cops. When everyone was back to check out the apartment where he was, of course, he was gone. After that, my boyfriend and I packed our stuff, went to stay with my parents, and 6 months later moved miles away from that town. That was the end of it. I live 1,000 miles away now from where all this happened, so a part of me thinks there's no way this person could have found me. But last week, I heard a knock on the front door of my apartment. I was expecting a package, so I figured it was a delivery driver and didn't answer. I'd go get the package later. Then they knocked again. And again. The third one made me feel uneasy, so I waited a good 20 minutes to check the door. When I did, there was no package, no note, no nothing. Someone was just knocking. Although it made me uneasy, I didn't initially think back to my stressful experience in my last town. Then just 2 days ago, I went out to get groceries. I have a little patio and I go out there in the mornings to just chill or check on plants a lot, and I've been known to leave it unlocked in the day on accident. Never thought of it as a huge deal, until I came home from the store 2 days ago and the deadbolt to my apartment was locked. The deadbolt can only be locked from the inside of the apartment, period. I assumed someone robbed me because I dumbly left my patio unlocked. I called my sister, I called my current new boyfriend, and I waited for people to be with me, and I went into my apartment through the sliding glass patio door. Nothing was out of place. Nothing of value was taken. At this point, my heart sank. Nothing was touched. Nothing stolen. Someone was inside my apartment just because they wanted to be inside of my apartment. I told my boyfriend about my stalker, and he's not taking this lightly like my past boyfriend. I filed a police report, we checked for recording devices and cameras, and he put Nest cameras up all over the place, and we're on high alert. I really truly hope this is a coincidence, but if this man really followed me across multiple state lines, that's really creepy. There's no one on this earth I'm less interested in meeting. Alright, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I have new memberships enabled for only $5 a month. You get priority reply to comments, members only chat rooms, and access to my Steam to be able to play games with me. So if you wish to support me, it's much appreciated.
As always, have a nice day.